Caitlin Wilson sat on the sagging couch of her new Denver apartment, staring at the cardboard boxes piled against the wall. She was 35 and an interior designer, but her life felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under her. The apartment was tiny, one bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for a microwave, and a bathroom with cracked tiles. Cars hummed outside, and the neighbor upstairs sounded like he was moving furniture. Caitlin clutched a glass of cheap white wine from the supermarket around the corner. She was still angry at her ex-husband, Nathan, for what she felt was a big deal about what she said at the office party. But underneath the anger was the truth. Her affair with Colin, the owner of a trendy bar, had ruined everything. She set her glass down on the rickety coffee table she'd bought at a yard sale and reached for her phone. An unread text from her friend Melissa glowed on the screen. "Hey, how are you? Want to meet for coffee tomorrow?" Caitlin sighed and put the phone down without answering. She didn't want to talk to anyone. Not right now. She stood up, walked over to the box labeled kitchen, and began pulling out the plates she and Nathan had bought together the first year of their marriage, white with a thin blue rim. Back then, they'd seemed like symbols of their new life. Now they were just dishes. The doorbell suddenly screeched, and Caitlin jumped, almost dropping her plate. She set it down on the counter and walked to the door, wiping her hands on her jeans. Through the peephole, she saw Mrs. Rogers, the elderly woman next door, holding a plastic container. "Caitlin, dear, it's me." Mrs. Rogers' voice was cheerful, despite her 70-odd years. "Open up, I brought you some cookies." Caitlin opened the door, forcing a smile. "Mrs. Rogers, you didn't have to worry." "Nonsense." The neighbor came in uninvited, put the container on the counter, and looked around. "Well, there's still a lot of work to do here, right? But you're a designer. You'll make this place cozy in no time." "Thank you." Caitlin closed the door. "Would you like some coffee? I only have an instant." "Oh no, I only drink herbal tea after 6. Mrs. Rogers adjusted her glasses and sat down on the only chair at the counter. "Tell me, how are you? I saw you carrying boxes yesterday." "Alone, without help." "Where is your husband?" Caitlin froze, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't ready to discuss divorce with a neighbor she barely knew. Well, I'm alone now," she squeezed out. Mrs. Rogers raised her eyebrows but did not ask. "Well, it happens. The main thing is to keep your head up. Try the cookies. I added lemon zest to them." Caitlin opened the container and took one. It smelled like vanilla and was indeed delicious. "Thank you, that's very kind of you," she said, chewing. "I always bake when I move," Mrs. Rogers smiled. "Well, not that I move often. The last time was in '92. But it helps, feel like home." Caitlin nodded, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to feel at home. This apartment was temporary, she told herself. She'd go back to normal life once she got this mess sorted out. "Okay, I won't keep you." Mrs. Rogers stood up. "If anything, I'm 103. Come in if you want to chat, or if you run out of salt." "Of course," Caitlin said as she walked to the door. Once the neighbor was gone, the silence returned, broken only by the sounds of the street. Caitlin went back to the boxes, but instead of continuing to unpack, she sat down on the floor and opened another one, labeled Photos. On top was a framed photo of their wedding, she and Nathan smiling against the sunset. Caitlin ran her finger along the glass, feeling a lump in her throat. How had it all come to this? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She frowned. It was unlikely that Mrs. Rogers would be back so soon. Caitlin stood up, brushed off her jeans, and opened the door. A guy in his mid-20s stood there, wearing a shabby jacket and holding a box of pizza. "Delivery for Caitlin Wilson." He checked the receipt. "I didn't order pizza." Caitlin shook her head. Your address is written here. Pepperoni, large, with cheese crust. Already paid for," the guy shrugged. "Maybe one of your friends decided to treat you." Caitlin thought about it. Melissa could, but she would have written. Or was it Nathan? No, that was stupid. He hadn't called or written since he sent his lawyer's information. "Okay, leave it." She took the box. "Thank you." "No problem." Have a nice evening. The guy left, whistling. Caitlin closed the door and set the pizza on the counter next to the cookies. The smell was enticing, and she realized she hadn't eaten since morning. She opened the box, cut herself a slice, and sat on the couch, munching and looking out the window. The streetlights had already come on, illuminating the people hurrying home. She suddenly felt cut off from the world. The phone vibrated. It was Melissa calling. Caitlin reluctantly answered. "Hey, are you alive?" Melissa's voice was energetic as always. "I wrote to you. You didn't answer." "Yeah, sorry, I'm just unpacking." Caitlin put the pizza down. "How are you? Is the new apartment okay?" Melissa was clearly trying to sound cheerful. "Well, let's just say it's not a penthouse," Caitlin tried to joke. "But it's livable. Listen, let's go to Bean House tomorrow at 10. Let's have some coffee and chat. I'll treat you." Caitlin wanted to refuse, but she realized that sitting alone for another day was not an option. "Okay, go ahead." "Thanks, Mel." "Great, and Kate, if anything, I'm here. You know." "I know. Good night." She hung up and looked at the pizza. Her stomach was growling, but she had lost her appetite. She stood up, put the box in the refrigerator, and went back to the box of photos. In addition to the wedding photo, there were pictures from their bike ride in Colorado Springs and from a friend's party where Nathan had his arm around her waist, laughing. Caitlin put the frame back and closed the box. It was too painful to look at. She walked into the bedroom, where the bed had only a mattress and an old blanket. The sheets were still in their boxes. Caitlin lay down without undressing and stared at the ceiling. The neighbor upstairs was moving something heavy again. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, memories of the party swirled in her head. She remembered standing among Nathan's colleagues, holding a cocktail, and Colin, in his black shirt, winking at her from across the room. She remembered Nathan saying something about their renovation, and her, unable to help herself, calling him weak. She thought it was just words, that he would brush it off, like he always did. But his face, she had never seen it like that. Cold, determined. Caitlin opened her eyes and sat up. She needed a distraction. She turned on the TV on the floor and found an old sitcom. The familiar laughter in the background calmed her down a bit. She picked up her phone and opened her messenger. There was an old message from Nathan before the divorce. "Kate, we need to talk. I know about Colin." She quickly closed the chat, as if that would erase the words. There was another knock at the door. Caitlin frowned another delivery. She walked up to the door and peered through the peephole. It was a middle-aged man in a blue uniform, wearing a badge that read Management Company. "Miss Wilson?" he asked when she answered. "I'm Bob, the technician. The neighbors were complaining about the noise. Were you moving something?" "No, it wasn't me." Caitlin shook her head. "It was upstairs. They were moving furniture, I think." "Oh, I see," Bob nodded. "I'll talk to them. Sorry to bother you. Just moved in?" "Yes, a couple of days ago." "Well, welcome. If anything breaks, be it a faucet or wiring, call me." He handed her a business card. "Thank you, Bob." Caitlin took the card and closed the door. She turned back to the TV, but the sitcom had ended and was now playing a commercial about insurance. Caitlin turned off the screen and went into the kitchen. She poured more wine and sat at the counter, looking at the container of cookies. Mrs. Rogers was right, they did help her feel a little less out of place. Caitlin opened her laptop on the counter and started scrolling through her work emails. Her latest project was to design an office for a small firm, but the client kept changing requirements, and she had already redone the sketches 3 times. She opened an email from the project manager, Tom. "Caitlin, the client wants to add more greenery to the interior. Can you send me updated renderings by Wednesday?" She rolled her eyes and closed her laptop. She didn't feel like working right now. Instead, she opened her social media. On the first page was a post from a mutual friend of hers and Nathan's, Sarah, with a photo from some dinner. Sarah was sitting next to her husband, Matt, and they were both smiling. Caitlin scrolled further, but came across a photo of Nathan. He was at some work event, in a formal suit, with a glass in his hand. The caption read, "Congratulations to Nathan Brown on his new project." Caitlin slammed her laptop shut. She finished her wine and went into the bathroom. The mirror reflected her tired face, dark circles under her eyes, disheveled hair. She washed her face with cold water and returned to the bedroom. Lying on the mattress, she listened to the sounds of the city outside the window. A siren was howling somewhere in the distance. Caitlin closed her eyes, trying to turn off her thoughts, but they kept coming back to Nathan. To his voice when he said he knew about Colin. To his look when he left the party. She rolled over and clutched the blanket. She will see Melissa tomorrow. Maybe talking to her friend would help. Maybe it wouldn't. But right now, she just needed to make it to the morning. 5 years ago, on a warm September evening, Caitlin Wilson stood by the window of the Bean House coffee shop in downtown Denver, holding a latte and watching the people walk by. She was 30 and had just broken up with Travis, a motorcycle racer whose habit of getting into bar fights had gotten to her. An interior designer with a growing reputation, Caitlin was tired of the chaos her ex-boyfriends brought. She wanted something different, something reliable, something predictable. And then Nathan Brown, an professional she'd met through her friend Melissa, walked into the shop. With his neat haircut and shy smile, Nathan was the polar opposite of her previous boyfriends, and she was intrigued. Caitlin sat at the table while Melissa chatted with the barista, and Nathan, holding a black coffee, awkwardly tried to make conversation. "So you're a designer?" he asked, looking at her sketchbook lying on the table. "It must be cool to create something beautiful." "Well, not always pretty," Caitlin smiled, pulling the sketchbook closer. "Sometimes it's just functional. What about you? Melissa said you were in it?" "Yeah, systems administrator," Nathan shrugged. "Not as exciting as your job, but I make sure the servers don't crash." "It's important," Caitlin said, though she had no idea what that meant. "Without the servers, everything would probably grind to a halt." "Something like that," he laughed, and she noticed his eyes soften. Melissa returned with a cappuccino and plopped down on a chair. "So, are you best friends yet?" she winked. "Kate, Nathan is a genius. He fixed my laptop when I spilled wine on it." "It wasn't hard," Nathan blushed. "Just a dryer and a little patience." Caitlin looked at him more closely. He wasn't a handsome man in the classic sense, not like Travis with his tattoos or Ryan, the DJ whose charisma could blind you. But there was something reassuring about Nathan. He wasn't trying to impress her or telling her stories about his exploits. He was just normal. "Listen, Nathan," Melissa leaned forward. "Caitlin recently finished a project for some fancy restaurant." "Tell him, Kate." "Oh, it was just a bar on 16th Street. Caitlin waved it off. "Nothing special, but they wanted a loft-style space, so I messed around with brick walls and stuff." "Sounds cool," Nathan nodded. "I was in a place like that once, and they had lamps hanging from pipes." "That's my project, exactly." Caitlin laughed. "I didn't think you went to trendy bars." "Well, I was dragged into it," he shrugged. "I'm usually more of a pizza and Netflix guy." The conversation flowed easily, and by the end of the evening, Caitlin found herself enjoying his calm. As they parted, Nathan asked, "Maybe we can go get pizza sometime. Without Melissa, if she doesn't mind." "Hey, I heard that." Melissa poked him in the shoulder. "But I'm in. Go eat your pizza." Caitlin nodded, writing down his number. She left the coffee shop with a light feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe this was what she needed. A week later, they met at Gino's Pizzeria on the outskirts of town. The place was loud, with sticky tables and the smell of garlic bread. Caitlin wore jeans and a plain white blouse, deciding not to bother. Nathan showed up in a plaid shirt and jeans, holding a box of board games. "What's this?" Caitlin raised an eyebrow as he placed the box on the table. "Scrabble," Nathan smiled. "I thought it would be fun while we waited for the pizza. But if you don't want it, I can take it away." "No, go ahead," she laughed. "Just warn you, I'm cheating." "I'm ready," he winked, opening the box. They ordered pepperoni pizza and started playing. Caitlin said design, and Nathan said code. She teased him about boring words, and he laughed when she tried to pass off quiet as a real word. That doesn't count. Nathan shook his head, taking a sip of his cola. You promised to cheat, but this is too much. Okay, I'll take it down, Caitlin giggled, removing the letters. But you owe me a bonus for creativity. The pizza arrived, and they ate, continuing to chat. Nathan told a story about fixing a server at 3M to save the company's data, and Caitlin shared a story about a client who wanted to paint the office bright pink. And you agreed? Nathan raised his eyebrows. I had to, she shrugged. But I added gray accents so as not to go blind. By the end of the evening, Caitlin felt comfortable. Nathan wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't. He was honest, and that won her over. When they got outside, he offered to walk her to her car. No need, I'm just 2 steps away, she said, but he insisted. It's best not to walk alone in Denver at night, he said, and she didn't argue. Nathan stopped by her old Honda Civic. That was fun, he said, shoving his hands in his pockets. Want to do it again? Maybe without the Scrabble, if you're such a cheater. Hey, I almost won, Caitlin poked him in the shoulder. But yeah, let's do it again. She got into the car, a warm feeling in her chest. Nathan wasn't like her exes. Ryan, the DJ, would stay with friends for weeks at a time and never forget to call. Zach, the artist, sold his paintings for pennies and was always asking her for money. Travis, the motorcycle racer, was an adrenaline junkie, but his life was a series of accidents, both literally and figuratively. Nathan, on the other hand, was reliable. He had a job where he got paid every 2 weeks. He talked about how he wanted to buy a house in a few years. It was so new, so grown up. Their dates continued. They went to the movies, where Nathan always bought popcorn, even though Caitlin said he didn't want any. They walked in Washington Park, where he once brought a thermos of hot chocolate because he knew she was cold. Caitlin liked that he remembered little things like that. Once, when she complained about a broken faucet, he showed up with a toolbox and fixed it in an hour. What are you, a part-time plumber? She teased, watching him tighten the nut. No, I was just watching a YouTube video, he grinned, wiping his hands with a towel. Anything can be fixed if you know how. Caitlin started comparing him to others. Her friend Sarah, who was dating a lawyer, always complained that he worked until midnight. Melissa was dating a guy who forgot her birthday. And Nathan. He sent her flowers for her 31st birthday, not even knowing that she didn't like roses. When she said she preferred lilies, he remembered and sent them the next time. 6 months later, Nathan took her to dinner at the Blue Maple, a place more serious than a pizza parlor. Caitlin wore a black dress she'd bought especially for the occasion, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like an adult. At dinner, after they'd ordered steaks and a bottle of red wine, Nathan took her hand. Kate, I want to tell you something, he began, looking into her eyes. I like you very much. And I think we can have something serious. If you want it too, of course. Caitlin felt a warmth in her chest. She knew he wasn't one to throw words to the wind. I want that too, she said, squeezing his hand. The waiter, a guy with a piercing in his eyebrow, brought their order and interrupted the moment. Your steak is rare, he placed the plate in front of Nathan, and yours is medium rare. Enjoy your meal. Thank you, Nathan nodded, but his gaze remained on Caitlin. They ate, chatting about their plans. Nathan told her he was saving for a down payment on a house and asked her what she thought of living in the suburbs. I don't know, Caitlin shrugged. I've always been a city girl, but maybe with the right person it would be nice. He smiled, and she knew he meant it. Her exes never talked about the future. Ryan dreamed of a European club tour, Zach of an exhibition in New York, Travis of a new race. But Nathan talked about real things, a house, a vacation, even retirement. It was scary, but also exciting. A year later, Nathan proposed. It happened in the park where they often walked. He got down on one knee, holding a simple ring with a small diamond. "Caitlin, will you marry me?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. She nodded without thinking. "Yes, of course," she said, and he put the ring on her finger. They hugged, and an elderly couple walked past and applauded. "Well done, boys," the old man shouted, raising his cane. "Hold on to each other." Caitlin laughed, snuggling into Nathan. She felt like she'd made the right choice. Her friends were already posting pictures of engagement rings and baby carriages, and she was still dealing with guys who forgot to pay for dinner. Nathan was her ticket to stability. The wedding was small, in a friend's garden. Caitlin wore a dress without a train, and Nathan wore a navy suit. Melissa caught the bouquet, and Sarah got drunk and danced with the waiter. After the wedding, they moved into a house they rented in the suburbs. Nathan put down the money, and Caitlin set about renovating, choosing paint and furniture. She was happy, or at least she thought she was. One day, a couple of months after their wedding, Caitlin was sitting in their new living room, flipping through a design magazine. Nathan walked in with his laptop, showing them a spreadsheet of their budget. "If we save money, we can buy this house in 3 years," he said, pointing to the numbers. "What do you think?" "That sounds responsible," Caitlin smiled, but deep down she was bored. Her exes never talked about budgets. They lived in the moment, and Nathan, he was a man of the plan. She put the magazine down and looked at him. "Maybe we can go somewhere this weekend, to a new bar or something." "Of course," Nathan nodded. "Pick a place, I'm in." Caitlin nodded, but inside she felt a little disappointed. Why couldn't he just tell her where to go? She pushed the thought aside. Nathan was reliable. That was what she wanted. And she decided she would appreciate that even if sometimes she wanted something else. Caitlin Wilson sat in the kitchen of their rented house outside Denver, flipping through a furniture catalog. It had been a year since she married Nathan Brown, and she was still adjusting to a life of order. Nathan, and a professional, was the man she could count on. He paid bills the day before they were due, vacuumed the carpets every Saturday, and even kept a grocery list on an app. Caitlin, an interior designer, had initially found this charming. Her ex-boyfriends DJ Ryan, artist Zach, motorcycle racer Travis lived in chaos, forgetting to pay rent or her birthday. But now, a year later, she found Nathan's organization boring, his habit of avoiding arguments annoying. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Nathan walked in holding his phone and placed his mug on the counter. "I ordered filters for the coffee machine," he said, looking at the screen. "They'll be here tomorrow. Is there anything you want me to add to the order?" "No, it's fine." Caitlin put the catalog down. "Although, maybe some seasoning. For steaks, for example." "Which one?" Nathan opened the delivery app. "We have black pepper and paprika. Maybe rosemary?" "I don't know." Caitlin shrugged. "Pick something." "Okay, I'll take a look," he nodded, but she noticed how he began to leaf through reviews of spices. Caitlin rolled her eyes, but said nothing. Why couldn't he just grab the first jar he saw? Her ex, Travis, had once bought a whole box of random spices at the market because they looked cool. Sure, half of them were expired, but there was something thrilling about that. Nathan studied everything like their lives depended on it. "I'm going to the market in an hour," she said, deciding to change the subject. "Want to come with me?" "I have a call with the team at 2. Nathan looked at his watch. "But if I have time, I'll join you. What should I take?" "Vegetables, maybe meat." Caitlin stood up, pulling on her sneakers. "I'll figure it out myself." "Okay, write if you need anything specific," he smiled, returning to the phone. Caitlin left the house feeling a little irritated. She didn't want him asking her opinion on every move. Why couldn't he just say, "Get the steak, I'll cook it"? She pushed the thought aside as she got into the car. Nathan was a good husband. She just needed to get used to it. The downtown Denver market was bustling with vendors shouting prices, children running between stalls, and the smell of fresh buns mingling with the scent of herbs. Caitlin picked up her basket and headed toward the produce section. At the tomato stand, she ran into Lisa, her former co-worker at the design agency. Caitlin, Lisa, a short woman with bright red hair, hugged her. How old? How are you? Hi, Lisa, Caitlin smiled. I'm fine. We just moved into our new house and are getting settled in. Oh, cool. Lisa took a couple of cucumbers, examining them, and I got divorced. 6 months ago. Now I live with a cat and two cacti. Seriously? Caitlin raised her eyebrows. What happened? Nothing special, Lisa shrugged, but her voice became quieter. I'm just tired of being with a person who is always silent. My ex was like your Nathan, he planned everything, didn't argue with anyone. But it's so tiring when a person is without fire. Caitlin nodded, feeling a pang. She didn't want to admit it, but Lisa's words had stung her. Well, Nathan's not exactly like that, she said, picking up a bunch of spinach. He's just quiet. Calm is good, Lisa smiled. But sometimes I want him to, just go and decide something. Without discussion. Yeah, Caitlin forced a laugh. Okay, what are your plans, besides the cat and the cacti? Oh, I signed up for tango. Lisa perked up. I go twice a week. There's an instructor there, Miguel. He's a dream. Come sometime, try it. Maybe, Caitlin nodded, although she wasn't particularly interested in tango. See you later, Lisa. Call me if anything happens. Lisa waved, walking away to the fruit counter. Caitlin continued shopping, but Lisa's words stuck in her head. She picked out tomatoes, potatoes, and steak, but she couldn't stop thinking about Nathan. He was the perfect husband. He never forgot to bring her yogurt. He always asked how her day was. But his habit of coordinating everything was starting to bother her. Sometimes she wished he'd just say, "This is how we do things." When she got home, she found Nathan at his laptop, finishing a call, his voice smooth and professional. Yes, I checked the logs. The problem is in the config. I'll send a patch in an hour, he said, making notes. Caitlin began to sort through the groceries. She pulled out a steak and placed it on the counter. I bought some meat, she said when Nathan ended the call. Maybe you could fry it today. Cool, he came over, looking at the bag. What sauce should I make? We have barbecue, but I can run and get another one if you want. Nathan, just choose. Caitlin couldn't help but sound annoyed. I don't care. Okay, barbecue then, he nodded, but she could see that her tone had offended him. Caitlin retreated to the living room, feeling guilty. She turned on the TV, but didn't look at it. Her mind was on Nathan. Why did he want to talk about everything so much? She remembered the time Ryan had just dragged her to a Mexican restaurant without even asking if she wanted tacos. It had been impulsive, but fun. Nathan would never do that. That evening they dined on steak and potatoes. Nathan turned on some jazz, which they both loved, and told them about a new project at work. We're launching a cloud service, he said, cutting off a piece of meat. If everything goes according to plan, maybe I'll get a bonus. Cool, Caitlin nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Do you want to, I don't know, take more risks, ask for a raise or something? Maybe later, Nathan shrugged. For now, I'm just doing my job. I don't want to rush. Caitlin said nothing, but inside she was seething. Why couldn't he be more ambitious? She put down her fork and changed the subject. Melissa invited us to a party on Saturday. Her friend is having a gallery opening. Shall we go? Sounds good, Nathan nodded. What time? 7, I think. Caitlin picked up her phone to check. I'll check. On Saturday, they arrived at a gallery downtown. The room was packed with people. Artists in colorful scarves, collectors in expensive suits, waiters with trays of champagne. Melissa greeted them at the door, hugging Caitlin. You're here, she beamed, holding a glass. Meet Justin, this is his gallery. Justin, a tall guy with a beard, shook their hands. It's good to see you, he said. Caitlin, Melissa said you were a designer. Maybe you could come over and help us with the decor. Oh, I'll think about it, Caitlin smiled, taking the glass from the tray. Nathan stood nearby, holding his drink and listening to Justin talk about the new exhibit. Caitlin noticed that he barely spoke, just nodded. As Melissa pulled her toward a painting of an abstract city, Caitlin whispered, "Nathan is back in his silent observer mode." "Oh, come on, he's just not a party animal," Melissa laughed. "My ex would be arguing with someone about contemporary art by now." "Yeah," Caitlin looked at Nathan, who was now talking to some guy with glasses. "Sometimes I think he's too neutral." "Neutral isn't bad," Melissa shrugged. "He's not crazy like your Travis." Caitlin nodded, but her gaze lingered on Nathan. He was smiling, but he didn't try to stand out. She remembered how Zach, her former artist, could argue for hours about the colors on a canvas, forcing everyone to listen. Nathan just existed. Later, as they were walking to the car, Caitlin couldn't take it anymore. "Why didn't you talk so much?" she asked, opening the door. There were so many interesting people there. "I told you," Nathan got behind the wheel. "I just don't like being the center of attention. I like to listen more." "But you could, I don't know, tell me about your work." Caitlin buckled up. "You do some cool stuff." "Maybe," he started the engine. "But it wasn't my party. I'm there for you." Caitlin remained silent, looking out the window. His answer should have touched her, but instead she felt irritated. She wanted him to be brighter, for people to notice him, for her to be proud of him. Caitlin Wilson sat at a table at the Mexican Fiesta in downtown Denver, stirring her margarita with a spoon. It had been a year and a half since she and Nathan Brown had married, and their lives had followed a strict schedule. He worked in it. She took on interior design projects. But the longer they were together, the more Caitlin found that Nathan, with his tendency to plan everything and avoid conflict, was boring. She found herself thinking more and more about her ex's Ryan, the DJ whose energy drew crowds, and Travis, the motorcycle racer who could make the bartender pour a drink faster with just a look. Nathan was different, and it was starting to irritate her. Tonight, Friday night, they were having dinner with friends, and Caitlin decided it was time to push her husband to be more assertive. The restaurant was buzzing, with servers scurrying between tables, salsa playing in the background, and the smell of tacos and lime filling the air. At their table were Melissa and her new boyfriend, Eric, and a couple Caitlin barely knew, Jenna and her husband, Paul. Nathan sat next to Caitlin, studying the menu. "What are you getting?" he asked, looking at her over the paper. "Enchiladas, I'm thinking. Or maybe a burrito." "I don't know," Caitlin shrugged, sipping her margarita. "Choose for both of us." Nathan nodded, but continued reading the menu, as if searching for a clue. Caitlin suppressed a sigh. Her ex, Ryan, had once simply pointed at the menu and said, "Get this, it's good." Sure, half his choices were tasteless, but that was life. Nathan, on the other hand, seemed intent on spending the entire evening staring at the menu. Melissa, who was sitting opposite, leaned towards Eric, showing something on her phone. "Look, this is the bar I was talking about," she said. "The DJ there just tore the place apart last weekend." "Cool," Eric, the guy with the tattoo on his neck, nodded. "Maybe we can go tomorrow. Kate, Nathan, are you coming?" "Sounds like fun," Caitlin smiled. "Nathan, what do you think?" "If it's not too late," he put the menu aside. "I have a morning call on Sunday." "Really?" Melissa raised her eyebrows. "Nathan, do you ever take a break? Live a little?" "I'm relaxing," he laughed, but Caitlin noticed how he looked away. "It's just that work is important." Caitlin felt a twinge of irritation. Why couldn't he just go along with it and have fun? She remembered Travis once dragging her to a party in an abandoned warehouse where they danced until the early hours. Nathan would probably say no because there's no parking. The waiter, a young guy with long hair, approached their table. "Ready to order?" he asked, holding up a notepad. "Yeah," Nathan nodded. "Chicken enchiladas for me." "Kate, what do you want?" "I told you choose for me." Caitlin looked at him, trying to hide her impatience. "Okay, then. Beef tacos." He looked at her, waiting for confirmation. "Okay," she nodded, although she didn't care. She just wanted him to decide without questions. The waiter wrote down the order and turned to Jenna and Paul. "And you?" he asked. I'll have the quesadilla, Jenna smiled. And Paul, as always, the chili. Hey, the chili here is the best. Paul, a burly man in a baseball cap, laughed. Don't judge until you try it. The waiter left, and the conversation at the table continued. Melissa talked about her new job in marketing, and Eric made jokes about her boss. Caitlin listened with half an ear, watching Nathan. He smiled, nodded, but said almost nothing. When Paul started telling a story about his fishing trip, Nathan simply listened, without adding anything of his own. Do you fish, Nathan? Paul asked, taking a sip of beer. Not really, Nathan shook his head. I tried it once, but it's not my thing. I'm more of a hiker. Hiking is cool, Paul nodded. Where was the last time you went? Rocky Mountain, a couple months ago, Nathan said. There's a trail to the lake, nothing too difficult. I have to try it, Paul smiled. Jenna, write it down, otherwise I'll forget. Caitlin rolled her eyes. Why hadn't Nathan told her more? Her ex, Zach, could go on for half an hour about how he'd painted the mountain landscape without anyone even asking. Nathan had always been so, reserved. The food arrived and the table filled with plates. Caitlin took a bite of her taco, but her mind was busy. She remembered Ryan once throwing an impromptu party at the bar where he was Jing. He stood on the bar, put on a track, and got everyone dancing. Nathan would probably just sit in the corner on his phone. Kate, why are you so quiet? Melissa nudged her with her elbow. Don't you like the food? No, it's okay, Caitlin forced herself to smile. I was just thinking. Oh, what? Eric bent over, munching on a burrito. Share, we're all our own here. Just about work, she lied. The client wants to redo the entire project, and I've already changed everything 3 times. Oh, I know that feeling, Jenna nodded. I'm in accounting, and we have a client who sends us the wrong reports every month. It's annoying. Yeah, Caitlin nodded, but her gaze slid to Nathan. He was eating, listening to Paul talk about his job at the auto repair shop. Nathan, Caitlin turned to him, deciding to push him. Tell me about that project you were talking about, the one with the cloud service. Well, it's just a new system for clients, Nathan shrugged. Nothing special, we're still testing it. Come on, this is cool, Melissa perked up. Explain, I don't understand any of this. Basically, it helps companies store data online, Nathan began. We set up servers so everything runs smoothly. That sounds complicated, Paul whistled. I wouldn't figure it out. It's not that hard if you know the basics, Nathan smiled, but quickly fell silent, returning to his food. Caitlin tightened her grip on her fork. Why couldn't he tell her more? To brag or something? Her ex, Travis, could talk about his racing for hours, even if no one was listening. She leaned toward Nathan. You could tell me more, she said quietly. It's interesting. I don't think they're that curious, he replied without looking at her. Let's just eat. Caitlin leaned back in her chair, feeling her irritation growing. She took a sip of her margarita and decided to try again. When the conversation turned to work, she turned back to her desk. You know, Nathan recently solved a problem at work, she said louder. Some kind of glitch in the system, and he fixed it overnight. Oh, cool, Eric nodded. What's the glitch? Nothing special, Nathan waved his hand. Just a bug in the code. Business as usual. Don't play poor, Caitlin poked him in the shoulder, trying to sound playful. You saved the company, didn't you? Not really, he laughed, but she could tell he was uncomfortable. Just doing my job. Caitlin pressed her lips together. Why couldn't he be a little bolder? She remembered Ryan bragging about his track being on some club's playlist. It was an exaggeration, but everyone's mouths were open. Nathan, on the other hand, didn't seem to know how to sell himself. After dinner, they walked out to the parking lot. Melissa and Eric left in a taxi, and Jenna and Paul lingered, arguing over who would drive. Caitlin and Nathan walked to their Honda. Why didn't you tell me so much? She asked, opening the door. Your project sounds cool, but you seem shy. I'm not embarrassed. Nathan got behind the wheel. I just don't like to brag. It's not my thing. But you could, Caitlin buckled up. You know, Travis always. Travis, Nathan turned to her, his voice sharper. Are you talking about him again? I'm just saying, she raised her hands. He knew how to hold attention. You could try. I'm not Travis, Kate, Nathan started the car. And I don't want to be. They drove in silence. Caitlin stared out the window, feeling guilty, but she couldn't stop. At home, she went into the bathroom and Nathan turned on the TV. She stood in the shower, thinking about the time Ryan had dragged her up to the roof of the club to look at the city. It was stupid, but exciting. Nathan would probably say it wasn't safe. When she came out, Nathan was watching the news. She sat down next to him, but did not touch him. PR, I'm sorry if I offended you, she said. I just want you to be more visible. I understand, he nodded, not looking up from the screen. But I am who I am. Caitlin remained silent. She wanted to say something else, but she didn't know what. Instead, she picked up her phone and opened her social media. There was a post from a friend bragging about her new boyfriend, a musician who was performing at a local club. Caitlin closed the app, feeling her mind drifting back to the past. Caitlin Wilson sat in her office, a small room in downtown Denver that she rented for client meetings. Sketches for a new project, a coffee shop redesign, lay on the table, but her mind was elsewhere. It had been 2 years since she had married Nathan Brown, an ed specialist whose predictability had increasingly irritated her. She wanted something new, something exciting, and a year ago that desire had led her to Colin Ridge, the owner of the trendy bar The Black Raven. His confident tone and cheeky jokes reminded Caitlin of her youth, of guys like Travis and Ryan. Their correspondence, which had begun as a discussion about design, quickly became flirtations, then secret meetings. Today, she waited for his message, holding in her hand the second phone she had bought especially for these conversations. The office was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioner in the corner. Caitlin opened her laptop to check her email, but instead stared at her phone. Colin had written, lunch at 12:30, Marino's on the 14th. She smiled, feeling a little trepidation. Nathan was at work, and she knew he wouldn't call until the evening. Caitlin wrote back, I will. Don't be late. She put her phone in her bag and tried to focus on her sketches, but her mind was racing with Colin. The office door creaked and Rebecca, a courier from the next building, walked in with a package in her hands. Caitlin, this is for you, Rebecca, a woman in her 40s with a short haircut, put the bag on the table. Some fabric samples, they said urgently. Thanks, Becky, Caitlin smiled as she opened the bag. How are you? Still running all over town? Yeah, Rebecca wiped her forehead. 3 deliveries in an hour today, and one guy was yelling at me for being late, like I could fly. I know that feeling, Caitlin laughed, pulling out the samples. Clients always want everything yesterday. Right, Rebecca nodded. Okay, I'll be running. See you around, Kate. Bye, Caitlin waved as she left. She laid out the fabrics, velvet and linen, but her gaze returned to the phone. Colin was not like Nathan. Nathan asked her opinion on every step, from dinner to renovations. Colin simply said, come here, or let's try this. It was a breath of fresh air after 2 years of marriage, where everything was planned in advance. Caitlin stood up, put on a light jacket, and left the office. Marino's was a 10-minute walk away, so she decided to take a stroll. The streets of Denver were buzzing with tourists taking pictures of graffiti, a busker playing a saxophone, and the smell of hot dogs wafting from a cart on the corner. Caitlin stopped at a bookstore window where an elderly saleswoman, Miss Edna, was laying out the latest releases. Caitlin, dear, Miss Edna noticed her and waved. Come in, we have a new detective. You'll like it. Maybe later, Caitlin smiled. I have a meeting. Oh, businesswoman, Miss Edna winked. Don't be late, or they'll take it away. Caitlin nodded and moved on. Miss Edna was always like that, chatting with everyone as if she'd known them for years. It made Denver feel cozy, But today Caitlin was too busy thinking to stop. Marino's was crowded, but Colin was already sitting at a table by the window, wearing a black t-shirt and jeans. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and he had the smile that made Caitlin's heart skip a beat. She sat across from him, trying to look casual. "You're just in time," Colin put his phone down. "I've already ordered you some wine. White, just like you like it." "Thank you," Caitlin smiled, feeling the warmth of his attention. "How are things at the bar?" "Oh, total chaos," he laughed. "The new bartender poured rum on the bar yesterday. The customers were delighted. And you? Still saving the world from boring interiors." "I'm trying," she said, taking a sip of the wine the waiter had just brought. "I'm working at a cafe now. They want something modern but cozy, as if that's easy." "You can do it." Colin leaned closer. "You have taste. Remember how you made my bar? Everyone still asks who came up with that." Caitlin felt proud. Nathan rarely complimented her work. He'd just say, "It looks cool," and go back to his laptop. Colin noticed the details. The waiter, a guy with a dragon tattoo on his arm, approached their table. "Ready to order?" he asked, holding up a notepad. "I'll have the shrimp pasta." Colin closed the menu. "Kate?" "Chicken salad," she nodded, although the food wasn't that important to her. The waiter left and Colin continued. "So, tell me, what's new with you, besides the cafe?" "Nothing special," Caitlin shrugged, but her tone became playful. "Just living my boring life. What about you? Any adventures?" "Well, I went to Boulder over the weekend." He grinned. "There was a concert, some indie bands. Stayed until the morning, danced with some hippies. You'd have liked it." "Maybe," Caitlin laughed, but inside she felt a pang. Nathan would never go to a concert spontaneously. He would check the schedule and reviews of the band. They ate, chatting about small things. Colin told her about the new chef who almost burned down the kitchen, and Caitlin shared a story about a client who wanted a mirrored ceiling in the office. But underneath the lightness, there was another conversation in the looks they gave each other, in the way Colin touched her hand as he passed her the salt. "Listen," he said as they finished their wine. "I have a free evening tonight. Maybe we should come over to my place, watch a movie or something." Caitlin knew that movie was code. They had met like this several times before, first under the guise of discussing design, then at a motel on the outskirts. She glanced at her watch. 3 o'clock. Nathan wouldn't be home until 7. "Okay," she nodded, feeling her pulse quicken. "But not for long." They left the restaurant and Colin hailed a cab. In the car, he put his hand on her knee and she didn't remove it. The cab pulled up outside his loft apartment in Lodo, with high ceilings and exposed brick walls. Caitlin had been there a couple of times when she helped design his bar. Now it felt different, private, forbidden. Inside, Colin turned on some music, something with heavy bass, and poured them whiskey. "What are we drinking?" he asked, raising his glass. "For freedom," Caitlin smiled, clinking glasses with him. They drank, and he pulled her toward him. She didn't resist. An hour later, lying on his couch, she felt a mixture of euphoria and guilt. Colin was everything Nathan had been missing, spontaneous, confident, alive. But the thought of her husband kept creeping into her head. "I have to go," she said, pulling on her dress. "I still have a meeting." "Already?" Colin pulled her in for a kiss. "Okay, but you're mine on Friday. I'm having a party at the bar. Come on over." "We'll see," Caitlin smiled, but she knew she would come. She went outside, called a cab, and checked her second phone. Colin had already texted, "You're awesome." She deleted the message and put the phone in a secret pocket in her bag. Nathan was waiting for her at home, and she had to act like nothing had happened. When Caitlin returned to the office, she found Josh, her assistant, sorting through tile samples. "Oh, you're back," Josh, a guy in his mid-20s with thick-rimmed glasses, looked up. "A client called, wants to add more wood to the interior. I said you'd call back." "Great," Caitlin nodded, sitting down at the table. "What kind of client?" "The one with the cafe," Josh handed her the folder. He also asked if we could install a fountain. I almost laughed. A fountain? Caitlin shook her head. Seriously? Yeah, Josh laughed. He said it would add zen. Maybe we should offer him a bonsai. Maybe, Caitlin smiled, but her mind was busy. She opened her laptop to answer the email, but instead stared at the screen. Colin was a risk, but he made her life brighter. Nathan was safe, too safe. She picked up her main phone and texted Nathan, "I'll be home by 7. Are you cooking dinner?" He responded a minute later, "Okay, I'll make some pasta. Tomato sauce," Caitlin responded, "Sounds great." Caitlin Wilson sat in her car in the office parking lot, checking the second phone hidden in the glove compartment. It had been 2 years since she married Nathan Brown, an IT specialist, and her secret affair with Colin Ridge, the owner of the Black Raven, was becoming increasingly dangerous. She lied to Nathan, using work or meetings with friends as cover for her tracks, and carefully covered her tracks, but her behavior had changed. Caitlin had become more abrupt, picking on her husband more often than not, and it hadn't escaped his attention. Nathan had begun to notice oddities, money missing from their joint account, a receipt from a restaurant she'd claimed she hadn't been to, but he hadn't yet asked questions. The silence only added fuel to her irritation. She wanted him to notice, to step out of his comfort zone for once, to demand an explanation. Caitlin opened a text from Colin. "Tonight at 6, Sunset Motel. Don't forget that red shirt." She responded, "Okay, I will," and put the phone away, feeling a mixture of nervousness and guilt. She told Nathan she'd be late for a client meeting. She started the car and drove home to change before telling another lie. Their home in suburban Denver was quiet, save for the ticking of the wall clock. Nathan was at work, and Caitlin quickly walked into the bedroom, opening the closet. She pulled out the red blouse Colin had mentioned and put it on with black pants. She looked confident in the mirror, but her eyes were nervous. She picked up her bag, checked that her second phone was still there, and headed out. On the way, she stopped at the Bean House coffee shop to kill time. It was busy inside, students with laptops, a couple of businessmen in the corner, and a barista she knew, Tony, wiping down the counter. Caitlin, hi. Tony, the guy with dreadlocks, smiled. Vanilla latte as usual. Yeah, Caitlin nodded, sitting down at the counter. Just make it quick, I'm on the run. Got it. He started making coffee. How are you? Haven't seen you in a while. It's all good, she shrugged. Work, clients, deadlines. Oh yeah, Tony set the cup down in front of her. We have a new manager here, always yelling at us for being slow, like I can make coffee faster than a machine. Sounds familiar, Caitlin smiled, sipping her latte. My client decided yesterday he wanted purple walls, after a month of white affirmations. Ha, classic, Tony laughed. Listen, have you ever thought about opening your own cafe? With your taste, it would be cool. Maybe someday, she waved her hand. For now, I have enough headaches with other people's projects. She finished her coffee, paid, and left. Tony was the type to chat for hours, but today she had to hurry. In the car, she checked her second phone again. Colin hadn't texted. She turned on the radio to distract herself, but the news of the traffic jams only made her more nervous. The Sunset Motel was on the outskirts, away from the busy streets. Caitlin parked far from the entrance so her car wouldn't be seen. Colin was already waiting in room 12, as they had agreed. She knocked and he opened the door, wearing jeans and a white shirt, a lazy smile. You look gorgeous, he said, ushering her in. The red blouse is my favorite. You asked, Caitlin smiled, setting her bag on a chair. How are you? Is the bar still intact? It's holding up so far. Colin poured wine from the bottle on the nightstand. Although one client started a fight yesterday, we had to call security. Seriously, she took the glass. How do you put up with this? I'm used to it, he shrugged, sitting down on the bed. It's a bar. There's always something going on there. And you, how are your boring customers? Not so boring, Caitlin sat down next to him. One wants to put a fountain in the cafe. Can you imagine? A fountain? Colin laughed. Our waiter's going to swim between tables now. Something like that, she giggled, feeling the tension melt away. They talked for another half-hour, but Caitlin knew why they were there. Colin moved closer, and she didn't pull away. An hour later, she lay next to him, staring at the ceiling. The guilt returned, but she pushed it away. This was her decision, her secret. I have to go, she said, standing up. Nathan will be home soon. Already? Colin reached out to her. Stay for another 10 minutes. I can't, she shook her head, buttoning her blouse. See you on Friday, yeah? Of course, he winked. My bar, my party, don't forget. Caitlin left the motel, feeling the adrenaline give way to fatigue. She got into her car and checked her main phone. Nathan had texted, I'm home, ordered Chinese. What time will you be there? She replied, in 20 minutes, and drove home, trying to clear her head. At home, Nathan sat in the living room, arranging boxes of noodles and fried shrimp on the coffee table. The TV was showing a basketball game, but the sound was turned off. Hello? He smiled as she walked in. How was the meeting? It's fine. Caitlin kicked off her shoes. The client changed his mind again, but I'm used to it. Tough. Nathan handed her a box of noodles. Eat it while it's hot. She sat down, picked up her chopsticks, and began to eat, trying to look relaxed. But her irritation was growing. Nathan was so ordinary. He hadn't asked for details, hadn't noticed that she was home later than usual. She remembered the way Colin had looked at her at the motel, and it only made her more dissatisfied. You're silent again, she said, putting the box aside. What? Nothing interesting at work? Yeah, fine, Nathan shrugged. Closed one bug. Now we're testing a new system. What about you? I told you, client. She looked at him. You never tell me anything clearly. Why? Because it's not that interesting, he smiled, but she could see that her tone made him tense. Do you want me to tell you how I spent 3 hours digging through the code? No, I don't want to. Caitlin stood up, going into the kitchen to get some water. Just be more active or something. More active? Nathan followed her. Kate, what do you mean? I don't know. She opened the fridge, avoiding his gaze. You're just always so passive, even at work. You're smart, you could ask for a raise. I'll think about it, he nodded, but his voice became quieter. But I do my job, and I'm happy with it. Okay, forget it, Caitlin waved her hand, returning to the living room. She turned up the volume on the TV to fill the silence. Nathan sat down next to her, but didn't touch her. She could tell he wanted to say something, but as usual, he remained silent. This infuriated her even more. Why couldn't he be like Colin, straightforward, assertive? The next day, Caitlin stopped by the bank to withdraw money for a new project. She noticed that a couple $100 were missing from their joint account. She'd used it to pay for a motel, but told Nathan it was for supplies. At the bank, she ran into Carlos, the teller who always joked with customers. Caitlin, how are you? Carlos, a man with a neat beard, smiled as he accepted her check. Buying a new couch or something? Ha, so far only tiles for the client, she smiled. And what's new with you? Oh, I signed up for the marathon. He handed her the receipt. Wish me luck, I'm already regretting it. Good luck, Carlos, Caitlin laughed. Don't fall at the finish line. I'll try, he winked. See you later, Kate. She left the bank, but her thoughts returned to the money. Nathan hadn't asked yet, but she knew he was checking the account. She had to be careful. At home, she found him typing on his laptop, his brow furrowed. What are you doing? She asked, putting her bag on the floor. Checking the budget, he looked at her. I noticed we spent more than usual. Did you take money last week? Yeah, for work, Caitlin nodded, trying to sound calm. Samples and stuff. Okay, he nodded, but she could see he didn't quite believe it. Just checking. Caitlin walked into the bedroom, her heart pounding. She pulled out her second phone. She texted Colin, Tomorrow at 8, your bar, he replied, waiting. She put the phone away and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Her life with Nathan was stable but boring. Colin gave her what she wanted: excitement, risk. Caitlin Wilson sat on the couch in their rented house outside Denver, flipping through an interior design magazine. It had been a little over 2 years since she married Nathan Brown, and a professional, and her secret affair with Colin Ridge, the owner of the Black Raven, had made her increasingly impatient with her husband. Nathan was reliable, but his habit of agreeing to everything and avoiding arguments was starting to irritate Caitlin. She wanted him to show some character, so she decided to push him by setting up small tests. She would leave dirty dishes in the sink, knowing he would wash them, or suggest going to restaurants he didn't like. His tacit agreement only increased her irritation, and she began to bring up Colin, whose decisiveness seemed ideal to her. Sunday morning was quiet. Caitlin sipped her coffee, looking at the kitchen counter, which was piled high with dishes from last night's dinner. She had purposely neglected to clear the plates, although she and Nathan usually shared the responsibilities. Nathan walked in, holding a tablet, and paused when he noticed the mess. "Didn't you wash the dishes?" he asked, placing the tablet on the table. "No, I was busy," Caitlin shrugged, not looking up from her magazine. "You can take it on." "Okay," Nathan nodded and began collecting the plates, turning on the faucet. Caitlin clutched the magazine. Why didn't he object? Colin would probably say something like, "Hey, it's your turn, get moving." But Nathan just didn't say anything, and it pissed her off. She decided to push him further. "Listen," she said, closing the magazine. "Let's go out to eat today. I'm tired of cooking." "Sounds good." Nathan wiped his hands with a towel. "Where do you want to go?" "Sushi Fusion." Caitlin named the restaurant Nathan didn't like because of the slow service. "They have new rolls there. I want to try them." "Okay," he nodded, although she could see that he didn't really want to. "What time?" "At 6. She stood up, going into the bedroom. "Reserve a table." Caitlin knew Nathan would prefer a pizza place or a grill, but her goal was to see if he would say anything. She pulled on jeans and a light sweater, checking her second phone, hidden in her underwear drawer. Colin had texted, "Bar party tomorrow, be there at 9. She replied, "I'll try," and put the phone away, feeling a little guilty. Sushi Fusion was crowded. Waiters scurried between tables carrying trays of rolls, and the smell of soy sauce and ginger filled the air. Caitlin and Nathan sat by the window, and she immediately noticed that he was studying the menu with a slight grimace. "What are you taking?" she asked, opening her menu. "Probably a California roll." Nathan shrugged. "And you?" "I don't know." Caitlin put the menu down. "Choose for me." "Okay," he nodded. "How about a dragon roll? You like it with avocado." "Okay," she agreed, but her irritation was growing. Why couldn't he just order without asking? She remembered how Colin, the last time they'd met, had simply told the waiter, "2 steaks, medium rare." No words. The waitress, a girl with a nose piercing, approached their table. "Ready?" she asked, holding up the tablet. "Yes," Nathan nodded. "A California roll and a dragon roll, and 2 green teas." I wrote it down. The waitress smiled and left. Caitlin looked at Nathan, deciding to tease him. "You always have the same thing," she said, stirring the water with a straw. "Want to try something new?" "I like Californian," he shrugged. "Why change it if it's good?" "I don't know," she leaned closer. "It's just that Colin, my client, is always trying new things. He says it keeps life interesting." "Colin?" Nathan raised his eyebrows. "The one with the bar?" "Yeah," Caitlin nodded, trying to sound casual. "He ordered some mango rolls the other day. Said they were great." "Maybe I'll try next time," Nathan smiled, but she could see that the mention of Colin made him tense. The food arrived and Caitlin continued her tests. She deliberately spilled some soy sauce on the table, knowing that Nathan usually cleaned up such small things. "Oh," she said without moving. "Well, it's okay." Nathan took a napkin and wiped the stain without saying a word. Caitlin clutched her fork. Why couldn't he at least make a joke or be indignant? She remembered Travis laughing and saying, "You're such a disaster artist," when she spilled a beer. It was stupid, but vivid. After dinner, they went outside. The sky was dark, and the streetlights illuminated the parking lot. Caitlin stopped by the car. "Why do you always say yes?" she asked, looking at Nathan. "I chose a restaurant you don't like, and you didn't even object." "Because you wanted to go there," he opened the door. "I don't mind." "But you could have said you wanted to go somewhere else." She crossed her arms. "Colin would have just said, no, let's go to the grill." "I'm not Colin, Kate," Nathan said as he got behind the wheel, his voice a little sharper. "If you like the way he handles things so much, maybe ask him where to have dinner." Caitlin froze, feeling her cheeks burn. It was the first flash of emotion from Nathan in a long time, but it didn't satisfy her. She got into the car, buckling up in silence. At home, she went into the bathroom, leaving Nathan in the living room. She turned on the water to drown out her thoughts, but they still revolved around Colin. He was everything she wanted Nathan to be: definite, bold. She pulled out her second phone and texted, "I'll definitely be there tomorrow." Colin replied, "Cool, I'm waiting." She put the phone away, feeling her heart pounding. The next day, Caitlin went to the supermarket to buy groceries. She deliberately left her list at home, knowing that Nathan usually made one. At the store, she ran into Mrs. Clark, a neighbor who was always walking her Yorkshire Terrier. "Caitlin, dear," Mrs. Clark, a woman in her 60s, held a basket of apples. "How are you? I saw Nathan fixing the fence last week. Such a good boy." "Yeah, he likes to keep things tidy," Caitlin smiled, taking the milk. "How's your dog?" "Oh, Biscuit stole my sock again," Mrs. Clark laughed. "I had to buy him a new toy. Have you and Nathan thought about getting a dog?" "Not yet," Caitlin shook her head. "Too much work." "Well, if you change your mind, Biscuit needs company," Mrs. Clark winked. "Okay, I'll run. See you." Caitlin nodded, continuing her shopping. She picked up items at random, knowing Nathan probably wouldn't notice the list was missing. When she got home, she found him mopping the floors, another habit of his that she found annoyingly predictable. "Are you cleaning again?" she asked, placing the bags on the counter. Yes, the floors were dirty. He wrung out the rag. "Did you buy everything you needed?" "Well, roughly." Caitlin began to unpack the groceries. "If you forgot something, you go yourself." "Okay," Nathan nodded without looking at her. Caitlin pressed her lips together. Why didn't he ask where the list was? She deliberately pulled out a box of cereal he didn't like and put it in plain sight. "Cereal?" Nathan raised his eyebrows. "You know I don't eat it." "Well, I wanted to," she shrugged. "You don't have to eat it." "Okay," he went back to cleaning, and Caitlin felt her irritation peak. She retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door a little too loudly. Sitting on the bed, she opened her laptop to check work emails, but instead began scrolling through social media. There was a post from Colin, a photo of his bar, filled with people. The caption read, "Getting ready for tomorrow. It's gonna be hot." Caitlin smiled, feeling her mood lighten. Colin was real, alive. Nathan was just Nathan. They watched a movie that night, but Caitlin barely followed the plot. She sat with her arms crossed, thinking about how Colin would probably turn off the TV and say, "Let's go to a bar." When the movie ended, she turned to Nathan. "Why do you never suggest anything spontaneous?" she asked. "We always do the same thing." "I thought you liked it this way." Nathan looked at her. "Want something else? Tell me, and we'll do it." "That's the problem." Caitlin stood up. "You always wait for me to say something. Kalini would just decide, and that's it." "Colin again?" Nathan frowned. "Kate, what's wrong? You keep mentioning him." "Because he's not afraid to take responsibility," she raised her voice. "And you're always asking what I want." Nathan was silent, looking at her. Then he stood up and went into the office, quietly closing the door. Caitlin was left alone, feeling a mixture of anger and guilt. She wanted him to argue, to shout, to do something. But as always, he just left. She went to bed without waiting for him, and all night she thought about tomorrow's meeting with Colin. Caitlin Wilson adjusted her dress in the mirror in the lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel in downtown Denver, where Nathan Brown, a professional, was hosting her annual company party. It had been 2.5 years since they had been married, and the tension between them was growing. Caitlin, an interior designer, had grown tired of her husband's predictability and was increasingly seeking excitement in a secret affair with Colin Ridge, the owner of the Black Raven. Colin was there tonight, supplying drinks for the event, and Caitlin, knowing this, had chosen a form-fitting blue dress that showed off her figure. She wanted to feel alive, and Colin, with his cheeky smile, made her feel that way. Nathan, as usual, was keeping to himself, sipping his beer and nodding as he talked to his coworkers, which only added to her irritation. The room was brightly lit, with long tables laden with appetizers and a bar in the corner where Colin was pouring cocktails. Music soft jazz played in the background, and the staff in suits and dresses laughed and chatted. Caitlin walked in, holding Nathan's arm, but her eyes immediately found Colin. He was standing behind the bar, wearing a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he winked at her as he mixed a martini for someone. "You look gorgeous," Nathan said, looking at her. "Want something to drink?" "Yes, margarita," Caitlin smiled, but her thoughts were on Colin. "I'll go say hello to the guys." "Okay," Nathan nodded and headed towards a group of colleagues standing by the window. Caitlin walked up to the bar where Colin was already handing her a cocktail. "For you," he grinned, handing over the glass. "Especially with lime, just the way you like it." "Thank you." She took the margarita, feeling the warmth of his gaze. "How are you? Are you tired of pouring drinks?" "Me? Never." Colin leaned closer, his voice quieter. "Especially when you're here in that dress." Caitlin laughed, sipping her drink. Her cheeks were pink from the alcohol and his attention. She glanced around to check on Nathan. He was standing with two colleagues, holding a bottle of beer and nodding as they explained something. "Your husband is in his element," Colin nodded toward Nathan. "Always so quiet." "Yeah," Caitlin shrugged, trying to sound casual. "That's his thing." She stayed at the bar, chatting with Colin. He was telling her about the new DJ he'd hired for the bar and about the customer who tried to pay for a drink in Bitcoin. Caitlin laughed, feeling the tension drain away. Colin was light, alive, unlike Nathan, who seemed to disappear into the crowd. A woman in a red dress, Nathan's colleague Emily, approached them. She held an empty glass and smiled at Colin. "Can I have another mojito?" she asked. "You seem to know your stuff." "Of course." Colin began mixing a cocktail. "Are you from the IT team?" "Yeah, I work with Nathan." Emily nodded, looking at Caitlin. "You're his wife, right? He always talks about you." "Really?" Caitlin raised her eyebrows, trying to hide her surprise. "And what does he say?" "Well, you're a designer. You do cool interiors." Emily smiled. "He also said that you choose furniture for your home. Sounds like a lot of work." "Yeah, it happens." Caitlin sipped her drink, feeling a twinge of guilt. Nathan had spoken fondly of her, and here she was, flirting with Colin. Emily took her mojito and left, and Caitlin turned to Colin. "Do you wink like that to everyone?" she asked teasingly. "Only those who look like you," he replied, pouring another cocktail for another guest. Caitlin laughed, but her gaze slid to Nathan. He was still standing with his colleagues, now with a guy in glasses who was, judging by his gestures, explaining something about code. Nathan nodded, but didn't add anything of his own. She felt annoyed. Why couldn't he be the center of the conversation like Colin? Another guest approached the bar, a man of about 50 in a gray suit with a badge that read, "Tom, Project Manager." "Colin, your cocktails are the best at this party," Tom said, holding out his empty glass. "Make me another old-fashioned." "No problem," Colin nodded, starting to mix. "How's the party? Not boring?" "We're holding up for now," Tom laughed. "But it would be sad without your drinks. Caitlin, you're Nathan's wife, aren't you? He did well today. He closed a big project." "Yes," Caitlin smiled, but her tone was colder than she intended. He didn't tell. Well, he's not one to brag. Tom took the cocktail and walked away, clapping Colin on the shoulder. Caitlin finished her margarita and ordered another. Colin winked as he handed her the glass, his fingers brushing her arm. She felt the warmth, but quickly reminded herself that Nathan was only a few feet away. She walked away from the bar, deciding to join her husband. Nathan stood with the same group, now discussing the new system their company was implementing. Caitlin came over to stand next to him. "Hello," she said, smiling at his colleagues. "What are you chatting about?" "Work," said the guy in glasses named Dan. "Nathan just told me how he optimized the server. It saved us a lot of time." "Cool," Caitlin nodded, but her gaze was on Nathan. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to burden you," Nathan shrugged, taking a sip of beer. "It's just work." "Just a job?" Caitlin raised her voice, feeling the cocktails getting to her. "You saved the project, and you act like it's nothing." "Kate, it's okay," Nathan smiled, but she could see he was uncomfortable. "Don't talk about it." Caitlin squeezed her glass. Why couldn't he be proud of himself? Colin would be telling everyone how he pulled off something cool. She turned to Dan. "Would you be so modest?" she asked, trying to sound playful. "Well, maybe I'd brag a little," Dan laughed. "But Nathan's always like that. He does his job and then keeps quiet." "Exactly," Caitlin looked at her husband. "Maybe you should be louder sometimes." Nathan said nothing, but his smile became strained. The conversation continued, but Caitlin was no longer listening. She finished her drink and returned to the bar. Colin greeted her with a smile. "Are you bored?" he asked, wiping down the counter. "A little," she shrugged. "There's too much talk about servers here." "Then here you go," he handed her a new cocktail. "This is on me. Relax." Caitlin picked up her glass, feeling her irritation with Nathan grow. She was chatting with Colin, laughing at his jokes about clients, until she noticed Nathan looking at her from afar. His gaze was calm, but there was something new in it, wariness. She ignored it, turning to Colin. As the party continued, Caitlin spent more and more time at the bar. She was approached by Sarah, a friend who worked in marketing and sometimes helped with her projects. "Kate, you're on fire tonight." Sarah raised her glass of wine. "This dress is just wow." "Thank you," Caitlin smiled. "You're okay too." "Listen," Sarah leaned closer. "That bartender, Colin, is he flirting with you? I've been watching all evening." "Oh, come on, he's just being friendly." Caitlin waved it off, but her heart sank. Well, Sarah winked. "Just be careful. Nathan's a good guy." "I know," Caitlin nodded, but her tone was sharper than she intended. Sarah walked over to her husband, Matt, who was dancing to jazz with another coworker. Caitlin looked at Nathan, who was now standing alone, looking at his phone. She felt a twinge of guilt, but quickly pushed it aside. She was just having fun, no big deal. Colin poured her another drink, and she stayed at the bar, laughing at his story about the drunk customer who tried to dance on the bar. Caitlin Wilson stood at the bar at Nathan Brown's company party at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Denver. The room was buzzing with conversation, laughter, and soft jazz, and the smell of cocktails mingled with the aroma of hors d'oeuvres. Caitlin, wearing a tight blue dress, was holding her third margarita, feeling slightly giddy. Her secret affair with Colin Ridge, the owner of the Black Raven, who was providing the drinks tonight, had made the evening exciting. Colin had been flirting with her all evening, and she, fueled by the alcohol, had returned the favor, barely noticing her husband. Nathan, as always, was keeping to himself, sipping his beer and nodding as he talked to his coworkers. Caitlin found it annoying. She wanted him to be more visible, more flamboyant, like Colin. And when the conversation turned to how couples made decisions, her patience snapped. Caitlin had just returned from the bar, where Colin had mixed her another drink and had joined a group of Nathan's colleagues standing at a high table with snacks. Nathan was there, holding a bottle of beer and listening to his colleague Dan, a guy with glasses and a thick beard, talk about his vacation. My wife and I were debating whether to get a hotel with a sea view or a cheaper one, Dan said, munching on canapes. In the end, we chose the view. It was worth it. Caitlin and I have a similar story, Nathan smiled, looking at his wife. We're currently choosing a design for the living room. We want both of us to be comfortable, so we discuss every detail. Caitlin, standing next to him, rolled her eyes so clearly that everyone noticed. The alcohol had loosened her tongue, and she couldn't hold back. Nathan, you're always so weak, she said loudly enough for everyone at the table to hear. Colin would just decide everything himself, without these endless discussions. The room didn't go silent, but there was silence at their table. Dan cleared his throat, exchanging a glance with Emily, Nathan's colleague in the red dress. Another woman, Linda, the HR manager, raised an eyebrow, holding a glass of wine. Nathan froze, his face pale, but he didn't respond. Caitlin, spurred on by the reaction, continued. Seriously, it's like I'm married to a non-alpha. She turned to the group, expecting laughter. Colin, he wouldn't spend hours picking out paint colors for the walls, would he? She glanced toward the bar, where Colin, wiping his glass, grinned but looked away, clearly unwilling to interfere. The table was silent. Emily smiled awkwardly, and Dan stared at his plate. Linda cleared her throat, trying to lighten the mood. Well, everyone has their own style, she said, adjusting her glasses. My husband and I always argue about furniture, too. He wants a leather sofa, and I want a fabric one. Exactly, Emily picked up, clearly trying to change the subject. The main thing is that in the end, they both like it. Caitlin, oblivious to the awkwardness, continued. Yeah, but sometimes someone has to just decide, she nudged Nathan, thinking it sounded funny, and not go through 100 options like Nathan. Nathan placed the bottle on the table. His movements were slow, but his face remained calm. Caitlin, that's enough, he said quietly, but his voice was as firm as ever. This isn't funny. Caitlin laughed, trying to keep her tone light. Oh, come on, she waved her hand. It's just a joke. Don't be so serious. But no one laughed. Dan coughed again, and Linda began talking about the company's new project, clearly trying to steer the conversation away. Caitlin felt her cheeks heat up, but not from shame. She was sure she was right. Nathan was silent, looking at her, and there was something new in his eyes, not just resentment, but weariness. He turned to the group. I'll go get some more beer, he said, and walked over to the bar. Caitlin remained at the table, feeling the gaze of her colleagues. Emily smiled, but her smile was forced. You and Nathan are always so alive, she said, sipping her wine. Yeah, Caitlin nodded, trying to look relaxed. He just takes things way too seriously. Mike, a colleague of Nathan's whom she had seen a couple of times at other events, approached her. He was wearing a gray jacket and holding a plate of shrimp. Caitlin, you're on a roll today, he said, chewing. How are your projects going? Nathan said you were doing a cafe? Yeah, Caitlin jumped at the chance to change the subject. I'm working on a place downtown. They want something modern but cozy. Cool, Mike nodded. My sister is a designer too, but she's more of an office type. She says clients are hell. Right, Caitlin laughed, but her gaze slid to the bar, where Nathan was talking to Colin. Colin said something, and Nathan nodded, but his face remained expressionless. She felt a slight twinge had he noticed how she'd been flirting with Colin. She finished her margarita and decided to go to the bar. Colin greeted her with a smile, pouring a cocktail for another guest. Well, are you having fun? He asked, handing her a new glass. Your husband doesn't seem to be in the mood. He's always like that, Caitlin shrugged, accepting her cocktail. He doesn't like parties. And you do, Colin winked. Maybe you'll stop by my bar next week. There'll be live music. We'll see, she smiled, feeling the warmth from his words. Another guest approached them, a guy in a plaid shirt named Kevin. He worked in the sales department and was known for his loud jokes. Colin, brother, make me something strong, Kevin said, slapping the bar. And for this lady too, if she wants it. I'm fine, Caitlin raised her glass. But thank you. Oh, you're the star of the evening, Kevin laughed. Nathan's lucky you drag him out to parties like this. Caitlin smiled, but her mind was busy. She glanced at Nathan, who was now standing with another group of colleagues, holding a fresh bottle of beer. He wasn't looking her way, but she could feel the tension in him. Her words about not being an alpha still hung in the air, and she was beginning to wonder if she'd gone too far. Sarah, a friend of Caitlin's who sometimes helped with her projects, approached the refreshment table. She was holding a glass of champagne and looked slightly tipsy. "Kate, you're on fire today," Sarah said, taking a shrimp. "What was that? You really hit Nathan." "I was just kidding," Caitlin shrugged, but her voice wavered. "He's too sensitive." "Well, I don't know," Sarah shook her head. "I'd be offended by that. Matt would definitely get mad if I said that in front of everyone." "Nathan's not Matt." Caitlin sipped her drink. "He'll just swallow it." "Maybe he will," Sarah shrugged. "But be careful, Kate. People are talking." Caitlin nodded, but her irritation was growing. Why was everyone defending Nathan? She turned toward the bar, where Colin was chatting with another guest, and felt her mood lighten. He was so light, so alive. She finished her drink and ordered another, deciding to think about Nathan later. As the party continued, Caitlin chatted with various people, trying not to look at her husband. Tom, the project manager she had spoken to earlier, approached her. "Caitlin, are you still here?" He smiled, holding a plate of cheese sticks. "I thought you were dancing already." "Not yet," she laughed. "And you? Don't dance?" "Oh, I'll leave that to the young ones." Tom waved his hand. "But the party was a success. Colin knows his stuff." "Yeah," Caitlin nodded, feeling her gaze drift back to the bar. She remained at the counter, chatting with Colin and the other guests, until she noticed Nathan packing his things. She stayed at the party, determined not to let Nathan ruin her evening. She chatted with other guests, trying to look cheerful. She was approached by Mike, Nathan's colleague, who always joked about his love of golf. "Caitlin, are you still there?" Mike held up a plate of cheese sticks. "I thought you'd be dancing with Nathan by now." "He left," Caitlin shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Something at work." "Really?" Mike raised his eyebrows. "He just closed a big project. I thought he would celebrate." "Well, that's just the way he is." Caitlin sipped her cocktail. "He's not a big party person." "Too bad," Mike shrugged. "Listen, if you want to play golf, call me. I'll teach you." "Ha, I'll think about it," she smiled, but her thoughts were occupied with Nathan. She walked over to the dessert table where Linda, the HR manager, stood selecting a pastry. "Caitlin, try these." Linda pointed to the chocolate cupcakes. "They're divine." "Thank you." Caitlin took one, but her appetite was gone. "Have you been working here for a long?" "Oh, about 10 years." Linda smiled. "I saw Nathan start out. He was always so reliable." "Yeah," Caitlin nodded, feeling a twinge of guilt. "Reliable, that's what he sounds like." Linda walked away, and Caitlin remained at the table, munching on a muffin without satisfaction. She checked her phone again. Nathan hadn't answered. She felt her irritation turn to worry. What if he really meant the end? She dismissed the thought, deciding that he was just angry. She walked back to the bar, where Colin was chatting with a young man in a plaid shirt. "Kate, this is Jack." Colin nodded at the guy. "He's in sales and says he wants to open his own bar." "Hey," Jack extended his hand. "I heard you're a designer. Maybe you could help me with my interior when I get rich." "Maybe," Caitlin smiled, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "Good luck with the bar." She walked away, feeling her mood drop. She wanted to have fun, but Nathan's words were haunting her. She walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Denver. Emily joined her, holding another glass of wine. "Are you okay?" Emily looked at her. "I saw Nathan leave. Did something happen?" "It's nothing," Caitlin shrugged. "He's just tired." "I see," Emily nodded, but her gaze was skeptical. If anything, I'm here. Nathan's cool, you know. I know, Caitlin forced a smile, but inside she was gnawing at the feeling of guilt. She stayed at the party for another half hour, chatting with Sarah, Mike, and others, but she kept checking her phone. Nathan hadn't texted. She ordered another drink, but it didn't taste good. Colin caught her eye, but she looked away. She needed to go home, but the thought of Nathan waiting for her with that cold stare was terrifying. A waiter, a guy with a short haircut, approached her, carrying a tray of appetizers. Want some? He asked, offering the mini burgers. They just came out of the kitchen. No, thanks, Caitlin shook her head. I'm full. He left, and she looked at the crowd. People were dancing, laughing, but she wasn't in the mood for fun. She took out her phone and texted Nathan. I'll be there soon. We need to talk. There was no answer. She called a cab, deciding to sort it out at home. But deep down, she knew that her words at the party weren't just a joke. They had hurt Nathan more deeply than she'd expected. Caitlin Wilson sat in a cab, watching the lights of Denver flash by. The corporate party at the Grand Plaza Hotel was behind her, but her words about Nathan being not an alpha and his abrupt exit still echoed in her head. She'd received his text, I'm gone. Get there. We're done. Caitlin, fueled by margaritas and irritation, braced herself for an argument, mentally lining up her arguments. She wanted to explain that she'd meant it as a joke, that Nathan, her it-guy husband, was overreacting. But deep down, she knew that her secret affair with Colin Ridge, the owner of the Black Raven, had made their marriage fragile. The cab pulled up outside their suburban home, and Caitlin paid her fare and stepped out, her heart pounding. The living room light was on. Nathan was home. She opened the door, dropping her bag on the floor by the entrance. Nathan was sitting on the couch, a mug of tea in front of him, steam rising into the air. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold, like she had never seen them before. Caitlin froze, waiting for him to shout, but he was silent, looking at her. Well, she crossed her arms, trying to sound confident. Do you want to explain why you dumped me at the party? It was humiliating. Nathan slowly placed the mug on the table, his movements measured. Humiliating? His voice was even almost frighteningly calm. Let's talk about what you said in front of everyone. That I'm weak. That I'm not an alpha. It was humiliating, Caitlin. It was a joke. She raised her voice, striding toward the couch. You always take everything too seriously. I just wanted you to be more active. More actively, he nodded, but there was no warmth in his tone. Now let's talk about Colin. Caitlin froze, her heart skipping a beat. She tried to keep her face. What do you mean? She asked, sitting down in the chair opposite. He's just a client. That's enough. Nathan looked her in the eye. I know about you and Colin. I found the receipt from the Sunset Motel in your bag. I noticed money was disappearing from our account, so I hired a detective. Caitlin felt her face turn pale. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words stuck. Detective, she squeezed out. Are you serious? You were following me? What else could I do? Nathan leaned forward. You lied to me for months, said you were staying late at work with your friends, but I saw how you changed. You became harsh, criticized me all the time, and I decided to test you. Caitlin gripped the arms of the chair, her nails digging into the fabric. You had no right, she said, trying to sound indignant. This is my personal space. Personal space? Nathan raised his eyebrows. You're sleeping with another man, Caitlin. That's not personal space, that's betrayal. She jumped up, feeling her cheeks burning. It was a mistake, she said, pacing the room. Colin, it doesn't mean anything. I was bored, Nathan. You're always so predictable, always agreeing, never arguing. I wanted something different. And you found this in a motel? His voice remained calm, but there was bitterness in it. You had a choice, Caitlin. You could have talked to me. Instead, you lied and humiliated me in front of everyone. I didn't mean to humiliate you, she turned to him, her voice shaking. I just wanted you to be stronger. like Colin. Colin, Nathan shook his head. You always compare me to him, to your exes. I'm not them, Caitlin, and I don't want to be. But you could, she almost screamed. You're smart, you do cool things at work, but you never show it. You just sit there and say nothing. Nathan stood up. His movements were just as calm, but his eyes were burning. I'm filing for divorce, he said. You betrayed me, not just today, but for months. I can't stand it. Caitlin froze, her breathing ragged. Divorce? She took a step toward him. Because of one mistake? We can fix this, Nathan. I promise it won't happen again. This isn't just one mistake, he looked at her. This is a choice. You chose him. And you chose to humiliate me in front of my colleagues. I can't live with that. Nathan, please, she grabbed his hand, but he gently pulled away. I love you. I'm just confused. To love is to respect, he said, moving to the window. And you didn't do that. I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm moving in with a friend tomorrow. Caitlin felt her eyes fill with tears, but she clenched her fists. You're just going to leave? She asked. After everything we've been through. What did we have? Nathan turned. You wanted a different me. You wanted me to be like Colin, like your exes. But I'm not them, and I'm tired of pretending I can stand it. He walked towards the door, taking the keys from the table. Caitlin rushed after him. Nathan, wait, she grabbed his sleeve. Let's talk tomorrow. You're angry now. I'm not angry, he looked at her, his voice even. I'm calm, and I've made a decision. He left, closing the door quietly. Caitlin remained in the living room, feeling her legs buckle. She collapsed on the couch, looking at the mug of tea he had left behind. Her phone vibrated, a text from Melissa, her friend. Hey, are you home? How was the party? Caitlin didn't respond, her hands shaking. She got up and went to the kitchen to get some water, but ran into her neighbor, Mrs. Clark, who came in through the back door holding a bowl of salad. Oh, Caitlin, Mrs. Clark, a woman in her 60s, smiled. I made too much salad. I thought you and Nathan would have enough. Where is he? He's gone. Caitlin forced a smile, setting the bowl on the counter. Work. At this hour, Mrs. Clark shook her head. Well, you young people are always busy. Try the nut salad. Thank you, Caitlin nodded, walking her to the door. I'll tell Nathan. When her roommate left, Caitlin closed the door and leaned against it. Her thoughts were racing. Nathan knew. He'd found the receipt, hired a detective. She'd tried so hard to be careful, but she'd still gotten caught. She pulled her second phone out of her bag and opened the chat with Colin. The last message. You were hot today. She started to write, but she stopped herself. Instead, she deleted the chat and turned off her phone. Caitlin walked back into the living room and turned on the TV to drown out the silence. There was an old movie on the screen, but she couldn't concentrate. She remembered the way Nathan had looked at her when he talked about the divorce. His eyes weren't angry, they were empty, and that was what scared her the most. There was a noise outside. The boy next door, Josh, was walking his dog. Caitlin looked out the window. Josh, a gangly teenager, was throwing a ball to his Labrador, who was racing around the lawn. Hey, buddy, don't eat the grass, Josh shouted, laughing. Caitlin turned away, feeling her chest tighten. She wanted to call Nathan, but she knew he wouldn't answer. She opened her laptop to distract herself and found an email from a client asking for some sketches for the cafe to be redone. She started to reply, but her fingers froze over the keyboard. There was a knock on her door. She jumped, hoping it was Nathan, but it was the pizza delivery guy, the guy in the red cap. An order for Wilson? He asked, holding up the box. I didn't order it, Caitlin shook her head. Already paid for, the guy shrugged. Someone left a note. For Caitlin, hang in there. She took the box, feeling a lump in her throat. Maybe Melissa. She thanked the delivery man and closed the door. The pizza smelled like pepperoni, but she didn't feel like eating it. Caitlin Wilson stood in the living room of their suburban Denver home, clutching her phone, which still displayed an unanswered text from Nathan. I'm gonna. Get there yourself. We're screwed. She had just returned from an office party where she had publicly called her husband not an alpha, prompting his departure. Nathan, and a professional, was waiting for her at home, and his calm revelation that he knew about her affair with Colin Ridge, the owner of the Black Crow, had caught her off guard. Nathan had revealed that he'd found a motel receipt, noticed the missing money, and even hired a detective to provide evidence. Now he was sitting on the couch, announcing the divorce, and Caitlin, feeling her world crumbling, tried to soften the situation, but his cold determination frightened her. Nathan, wait! Caitlin stepped toward him, her voice shaking. Let's talk. This isn't what you think. Not that? Nathan looked at her, his eyes empty. You slept with Colin. I have pictures, Caitlin, correspondence, dates. What is there to discuss? She swallowed, feeling her cheeks burn. She expected shouts, accusations, but his calm was worse. It was a mistake, she said, sitting down in the chair opposite. Colin, he's nothing. It was stupid, I know. But I love you. Love? Nathan raised his eyebrows, his voice even. You called me weak in front of all my coworkers. You lied to me for months. That's not love. I didn't mean to hurt you. Caitlin leaned forward, her hands shaking. I was bored, Nathan. You're always so proper. I wanted you to be different. Different, he nodded, as if he'd expected it. Like Colin, or like your Travis. You wanted another me, Caitlin. But I won't live with someone who doesn't respect me. I respect you. She jumped up, her voice breaking. I'm just confused. Give me a chance to fix it. We can go to a psychologist, talk. No, Nathan shook his head. I've already decided. I'm filing for divorce. I rented an apartment and I'm moving in tomorrow. I've contacted a lawyer. Don't call me Caitlin. She froze, her breathing ragged. She had expected an argument, but not this ending. Are you serious? She took a step toward him, trying to catch his eye. You're just going to leave? After everything we've had? What did we have? Nathan stood up. His voice remained calm. You lied to me, compared me to others, humiliated me in front of people. This is not a marriage. Nathan, please. She grabbed his hand, but he gently pulled away. I'll do anything to fix this. I swear Colin won't come into my life again. It's not just about Colin, he looked at her. It's about how you treat me. I'm tired of being your project, Caitlin. He took the keys from the table and headed for the door. Caitlin rushed after him. Nathan, wait, she almost screamed. Don't go. Let's at least talk tomorrow, when you've cooled down. I'm calm, he stopped at the door without turning around. And I've said everything I wanted to. My lawyer will contact you. The door closed behind him quietly, without a slam. Caitlin remained in the living room, her legs buckling as she sank onto the couch. Her phone was lying on the table, the screen still glowing. She picked it up, hoping for a new message, but there was nothing. She opened the conversation with Colin on the second phone, but didn't write, instead deleting his last message. You were hot today. There was a knock at the door and Caitlin jumped. She thought it was Nathan returning, but through the peephole she saw Mrs. Clark, her neighbor, with her Yorkshire Terrier, Biscuit, on a leash. Caitlin, dear, Mrs. Clark smiled as she opened the door. I was out with Biscuit and thought I'd drop you off some pie. You like pumpkin pie, don't you? Oh, thank you. Caitlin forced a smile as she accepted the foil-wrapped plate. That's very kind of you. Where's Nathan? Mrs. Clark looked into the house. He's usually messing around in the garage at this time. He's at work, Caitlin lied, setting the pie on the table. Urgent project. Oh, these young ones, always busy. Mrs. Clark shook her head. Biscuit, don't drag it out. Okay, Caitlin, if anything, I'm across the street. Call me if you want to chat. Absolutely. Caitlin closed the door, feeling her throat tighten. She walked back into the living room and turned on the TV to drown out the silence. The screen was playing the cooking channel, where a woman in a bright apron was baking cupcakes. Caitlin wasn't watching, her mind on Nathan. She wanted to call him, but his words, Don't call, echoed in her head. She opened her laptop, hoping to distract herself, but instead came across an email from a client asking for more lighting in a cafe project. She started to reply, but her fingers were shaking. There was a noise outside. A teenager from the neighborhood, Josh, was skateboarding, laughing loudly with his friends. Caitlin looked out the window. Josh, a lanky guy in a cap, was doing a trick, and his friend, a guy with long hair, was filming it on his phone. "Let's do it again," the friend shouted. "This is for TikTok." Caitlin turned away, feeling her chest tighten. She wanted a normal life, but it was all falling apart. She picked up her phone and texted Melissa, her friend, "Can I meet up? Nathan's gone." Melissa texted back a minute later, "Wow, what? Bean House tomorrow at 10. Caitlin texted, "Okay," and put the phone down. She went to the kitchen to get some water, but came across Mrs. Clark's pie. The smell of pumpkin was pleasant, but she didn't feel like eating it. She remembered Nathan once baking her pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving, even though he hated cooking. She'd laughed because he'd forgotten to add sugar. Now that memory cut her. There was another knock at the door. Caitlin sighed, expecting Mrs. Clark, but it was the delivery man, a guy in a green jacket, with a package from a Chinese restaurant. "Order for Wilson?" he asked, looking at his phone. "I didn't order it." Caitlin shook her head. "It's already paid for." He held out the package. Someone wrote, "Caitlin, hang in there." "Thank you," she said, taking the bag and closing the door. It must have been Melissa, she thought. Beauty didn't check. Caitlin set the food down on the table next to the pie and sat down, watching the TV. The presenter was now cutting up a pumpkin, explaining how to make soup. Caitlin turned off the sound, unable to listen. She opened her second phone, but did not text Colin. Instead, she deleted his number, even though she knew it would make no difference. She lay down on the couch, fully dressed, and closed her eyes. The noise of the street cars, a barking dog, was the only sound in the house. She remembered the way Nathan had looked at her when he had talked about the divorce. His calm was scarier than his screams. She wanted to fix it, but she didn't know how. She picked up her phone and texted Nathan, "Please, let's talk tomorrow." There was no answer. Caitlin lay down, feeling her eyes fill with tears, and realized that for the first time in a long time, she was afraid to be alone. Caitlin Wilson sat on the narrow bed in her small Denver apartment, clutching a cold cup of tea. It had been 4 months since she had divorced Nathan Brown, her ex-husband, and a professional who had gotten their house through a prenuptial agreement that stipulated how he would split property if he cheated on her. Caitlin was still angry, believing that Nathan had exaggerated her guilt over her affair with Colin Ridge, the bar owner, and the public humiliation she had suffered at an office party. But in the quiet of her apartment, surrounded by boxes she had never unpacked, she began to remember his words, "You didn't love me, Caitlin. You loved your fantasy." They made her wonder for the first time if she had been the reason their marriage had failed. Meanwhile, Nathan had reportedly gotten a promotion and started dating a teacher described by acquaintances as kind and genuine. Caitlin, on the other hand, struggled with loneliness, which was becoming increasingly difficult. The apartment was cramped, with peeling walls and a window that looked out onto a noisy street. Caitlin sat in old jeans and a sweatshirt, scrolling through her phone. Social media showed her friends' lives. Sarah posted a photo of her and her husband on a walk. Melissa bragged about a new project. Caitlin scrolled further and came across a post from Nathan's colleague, Emily. "Congrats, Nathan, on your promotion. New project manager, you're a star." Caitlin clutched her phone, feeling a pang. She knew he'd started dating someone. Melissa mentioned a teacher named Abby, sweet and easygoing. Caitlin closed the app, not wanting to see more. She stood up to get some water, but stumbled upon the box of dishes she and Nathan had bought together. She opened it, pulled out a white plate with a blue pattern, and froze. Nathan had chosen the plates because they were simple but stylish. She had laughed at him then, saying he was too practical. Now the memory cut her. There was a knock at the door. Caitlin sighed and opened it, expecting Mrs. Rogers, her neighbor. But it was Linda, a courier from the office next door, with a package in her hands. "Caitlin, hi. Linda, A woman with short brown hair smiled. These are paint samples for your project. The client asked me to give them to you. Thank you, Linda. Caitlin took the bag, placing it on the table. Want some tea? I only have tea bags, but still. Oh, I'd love to. Linda took off her jacket, sitting down on a chair. I'm tired of running. 3 deliveries this morning, and one guy was yelling that I brought it to the wrong place. I know the feeling. Caitlin put the kettle on. My clients are always changing their plans. Yeah, Linda nodded, looking at the boxes. Have you unpacked yet? Moving is hell. Yeah, no time for that. Caitlin shrugged, pouring tea. How are you doing? It's fine. Linda sipped her tea. My son went to college. Now I'm officially an old lady. And you? How are you? Caitlin hesitated. She didn't want to talk about the divorce, but Linda was the type to keep her head down. It could be better, she said, sitting down opposite him. It's just a lot of changes. I understand, Linda nodded. If anything, invite me for coffee. I know all the crappy eateries in the area. Agreed, Caitlin smiled, walking her to the door. After Linda left, Caitlin returned to her desk, but her mind was elsewhere. She opened her laptop to respond to a client email, but instead began scrolling through old photos in the cloud. There she was with Nathan on a picnic. There he was fixing their old lamp. There they were laughing at Sarah's party. She closed the folder, feeling a lump in her throat. The phone vibrated, a call from Melissa. Caitlin answered, hoping for support. Hey, Kate, Melissa's voice was cheerful. How are you? I saw Nathan at the cafe yesterday with some girl. I think it was that teacher, Abby. Yeah? Caitlin clutched the phone, trying to sound nonchalant. Well, he's moving on fast. Look, I didn't mean to upset you. Melissa hesitated. It's just, are you okay? Do you want to meet up? Maybe tomorrow, Caitlin sighed. I'm not in the mood right now. Okay, but call me if anything happens. Melissa paused. Kate, you're not alone, you know. I know, Caitlin hung up, feeling her eyes fill with tears. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the boy next door, Josh, was playing basketball with his friends, loudly arguing about the score. It's not a foul, Josh yelled, throwing the ball. You're just playing badly. Let's play again, replied his friend, the guy in the red cap. Caitlin turned away, unable to watch their nonchalance. She remembered Nathan saying, "You loved your fantasy." The words burned her. She wanted to call him, but she knew he wouldn't answer. Instead, she opened her messenger and texted Sarah, "Can I come over? Need some advice." Sarah responded, "Come over, I'm home." Caitlin put on her jacket and drove to Sarah's house, which was 15 minutes away. Sarah met her at the door, holding a mug of coffee. Kate, you look tired. Sarah hugged her. Come in, I just baked some cookies. They sat in the living room, which smelled of vanilla. Sarah's husband, Matt, was in the garage, tinkering with the car. Caitlin took a cookie but didn't eat it. I messed everything up, she said, looking at Sarah. Nathan, he was right. I didn't respect him. Oh, Kate, Sarah sat closer. Do you understand that now? I don't know, Caitlin shook her head. I thought he was exaggerating, that it was just one joke. But I lied to him, compared him to others. I was terrible. You're not terrible, Sarah touched her hand. You were wrong. It happens. But Kate, did you really love him? Caitlin was silent, looking at the cookies. She remembered Nathan bringing her coffee in bed, planning their budget, always asking what she wanted. She thought she wanted something else, but now she wasn't sure. I don't know, she admitted. I wanted him to be like Colin, or like my exes, but now I miss him. That's okay, Sarah nodded. But Kate, he's moving on. Maybe you should too. What? Caitlin looked at her. All my friends avoid me. I live in this hole. I don't even know where to start. Start small, Sarah shrugged. Find a new project, take up yoga, whatever. You're strong, Kate. Caitlin nodded, but she didn't feel strong. She finished her tea and left, promising to call Sarah. When she got home, she found Mrs. Rogers walking her dog. "Caitlin, you're late." Mrs. Rogers smiled. Biscuit almost ran away, can you believe it? "Ha, he's a quick one," Caitlin smiled, petting the dog. "Thanks for the muffins, by the way." "You're welcome," Mrs. Rogers winked. "Call me if you want to chat." Caitlin walked into the apartment, feeling a little warm from the conversation. She lay down on her bed, looking at the ceiling. Nathan's words echoed in her head. "You loved your fantasy." For the first time, she wondered if maybe he was right. She wanted to change him, not accept him, and now she was paying for it with loneliness. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.